I've always believed that life on a farm is made up of small, simple moments, the kind you don't notice until you look back and realize they were the most important. Early mornings filled with the smell of hay, the sound of chickens scratching in the dirt, and the slow rhythm of cows chewing in the pasture. To some people, it might look ordinary, even boring, but to me, it was everything. And right at the center of it all was my dog, Max. Max wasn't a fancy breed. He wasn't a purebred border collie or a big farm guard dog. He was a mix of who knows what. Shaggy fur the color of dust, floppy ears that perked up only when he was excited, and warm brown eyes that seemed to understand more than I ever said out loud. He wasn't just a pet. He was family. Max had a way of making himself useful around the farm. He followed me everywhere, whether I was feeding the chickens, carrying water to the barn, or fixing a broken fence. He would chase away stray foxes that sometimes prowled too close to the coop, and he always kept a watchful eye on the younger calves when they wandered too far away. But more than that, Max gave me a sense of comfort. Farming life can be lonely, especially when the days drag on with hard work and the nights are filled with silence. With Max by my side, that silence never felt empty. I talked to him the way other people might talk to a friend. He didn't answer, of course, but the way his ears tilted and his tail wagged made me feel like he was listening. That summer had been unusually hot. The fields turned yellow too early. The grass felt brittle underfoot, and the air itself seemed heavy, like it carried the weight of something waiting to happen. Every day I worried about the dryness. The barn was full of hay, stacked high in golden towers that could feed our animals through the winter. But hay is a blessing and a curse. It keeps life going, but it only takes one spark to turn it into a nightmare. I remember one evening in particular. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, and the farm seemed to exhale with the coolness that finally crept in after a long day of heat. I sat on the porch with a glass of water, my shirt damp with sweat, watching Max chase grasshoppers across the yard. He would pounce, miss, and then look at me with this goofy expression, tongue hanging out as if to say, "Did you see that?" I laughed and reached down to pat his head when he finally came back, panting hard but proud of himself. "You're a fool, Max, but you're my fool." Later that night, I walked through the barn one last time before bed. It was a habit I had, making sure the animals were settled, the doors were latched, the feed bins closed. The horses shifted in their stalls, their breath rising in little clouds. The cows lay quiet, their bellies full, chewing slowly in the dark. Everything was calm, ordinary, safe. Or at least, that's what I thought. Max followed close at my heels, as he always did. When I turned off the lantern and stepped out into the night air, he paused for a moment, sniffing the ground. His ears twitched, his nose lifted, and for a second he let out a low, uncertain whine. "What is it, boy?" I asked, frowning. But then he shook his fur, wagged his tail, and bounded ahead of me toward the house. I shrugged it off. Maybe he had just caught the scent of a raccoon or a rabbit. Out here, animals crossed paths with us every night. By the time I climbed into bed, the world outside had gone still. The crickets sang their endless chorus, the frogs down by the creek croaked in rhythm, and the faint breeze slipped through the open window. I drifted off with the comfort of routine, Max curling up on the rug beside my bed like he always did. But if I had paid closer attention, I might have noticed the unease in his body, the way he kept lifting his head to sniff the air, or the faint tension in his breathing. Max already knew something I didn't, that the calm of the farm was about to be shattered.
It was past midnight when I woke up to a sound I couldn't ignore. At first, it slipped into my dreams, just a faint scratching noise, like someone dragging a branch along the wooden porch. But then came the barking, sharp, urgent, and unrelenting. "Max?" I muttered, half asleep, reaching out into the darkness. His rug was empty. The barking grew louder, echoing through the stillness of the night. It wasn't his playful bark, not the one he used when chasing rabbits. This was different. Short, frantic bursts that carried desperation. I sat up, my heart pounding. Something wasn't right. Throwing off the blanket, I stumbled toward the door. As soon as I opened it, Max charged in, nearly knocking me over. His fur bristled, his eyes wide, and he let out a deep growl before darting back toward the yard. He stopped, looked back at me, and barked again, commanding me to follow. All right, I'm coming," I whispered, though fear was already tightening in my chest. The air outside hit me immediately. It was thick, heavy, and it smelled wrong. A faint, acrid scent of smoke drifted on the breeze. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the lantern from the porch, lit it with shaky hands, and lifted it high. The glow barely reached the edge of the barn, but that was enough. A thin, wavering plume of smoke curled upward from the far corner. "Oh God," I breathed. Max barked again, sprinting toward the barn doors. The world seemed to tilt as adrenaline surged through me. My animals, my cows, horses, chickens, they were all inside. The barn wasn't just wood and hay, it was everything. I ran, my bare feet slapping against the dry earth, the lantern swinging wildly in my hand. Max reached the doors first, clawing at the wood, barking furiously. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, and was met with a rush of hot air that sucked the breath from my lungs. Inside, the smoke was already thick. I could hear the restless shifting of the horses, the panic lowing of the cows. Their fear vibrated the air. Easy, I coughed, stumbling forward. The lantern light flickered across the stalls, shadows leaping like demons on the walls. Max stayed close, his barking echoing in the chaos. He darted to the far end of the barn, then back to me, urging me on. The fire hadn't reached the animals yet, but it was close. Too close. A pile of hay smoldered in the corner, glowing red, with tiny sparks that spread like wicked fingers. I had no time to think. Instinct took over. I flung open the first stall, grabbing the halter of the nearest horse. The animal snorted, eyes rolling white in fear, but I tugged hard, pulling it into the night air. Max raced ahead, barking at his heels, guiding it out into the yard. "Good boy, Max," I shouted, my voice raw. Back inside, the smoke thickened. My lungs burned, my eyes watered, but I forced myself forward. Stall by stall, I threw the doors open. The cows bellowed, stumbling into the open, their massive bodies nearly knocking me down as they bolted. Max darted among them, fearless, snapping at their legs to drive them toward safety. Somewhere above, the dry rafters groaned. A spark crackled, and a small flame licked upward, catching faster than I could process. My heart hammered. I didn't have long. "Chickens," I gasped, realizing the coop was built into the far end of the barn. I ran, nearly tripping over a bucket in the haze. My lantern flickered, the smoke swallowing its light, but I could just make out the small wooden enclosure. The hens inside clucked frantically, wings beating against the wire. Before I could reach for the latch, Max shot forward, pawing at the door, barking wildly. I dropped to my knees, fumbled with the lock, and yanked it open. The chickens burst out in a flurry of feathers scattering into the night. I coughed so hard it felt like my chest was tearing. The heat was rising, flames beginning to crawl along the hay bales. "Max, out," I wheezed, staggering backwards. But he didn't leave. He stayed at my side, growling low, eyes fixed on the far corner of the barn. "What now?" I cried. But then I saw it, a small calf, pressed against the back wall, trembling, too terrified to move. I lurched toward it, my legs heavy as lead, The fire hissed louder, sparks raining down from above. My mind screamed at me to get out, but my heart wouldn't let me leave the calf behind. Max bolted past me, barking furiously at the frightened animal. He nipped at his legs, not to hurt, but to push. The calf stumbled forward, still frozen in fear. I grabbed his halter, coughing so hard I could barely see. Together, Max and I forced it forward, step by agonizing step. When we finally burst through the barn doors, the night air hit me like salvation. I collapsed to my knees, dragging the calf with me, my throat raw, my chest on fire. Max circled us, barking at the flames now devouring the barn roof. His fur was streaked with ash, his eyes wild but determined. Behind us, the animals milled in the yard, terrified but alive. Every single one of them alive. I looked at Max, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. My dog, my companion, my fool. He had saved us all. But the fire wasn't finished yet. The barn was a furnace now, and the wind shifted, carrying embers toward the farmhouse, toward my home. And this time, Max didn't wait for me to move. He was already running.
Max tore across the yard, his bark carrying through the night like an alarm bell. I staggered to my feet, pulling the calf toward the safety of the pasture fence before turning toward the farmhouse. The sight froze me. Sparks danced across the roof, glowing orange as the wind whipped them into tiny, hungry fires. My stomach lurched. If the house caught, it would be no saving it, not with just me, a lantern, and a bucket of water. "Max!" I shouted, sprinting after him. He was already at the porch, barking furiously, his paws scratching against the door. My parents were inside. They had gone to bed early, exhausted from the day's heat. If the fire spread to the house while they slept, I didn't let myself finish the thought. I raced up the steps, threw the door open, and stormed inside. Smoke had already begun to creep through the open windows. "Wake up! Fire!" I bellowed, my voice cracking. My parents stumbled from their room, confusion painted on their faces. My mother coughed, clutching her chest, while my father blinked, disoriented. What's happening? "The barn's gone up! The fire's spreading!" Their shock gave way to grim understanding. My father grabbed his boots, my mother her shawl, and we all spilled back outside into the chaos. The barn roared like a monster, flames shooting skyward, painting the night in hellish light. Ash rained down, swirling in the wind. The heat was unbearable, pushing us back even as we tried to shield the farmhouse with buckets of water, splashing it against the walls, the porch, the windows. Max darted back and forth, barking at every crackle of flame, every gust of sparks. He never strayed far, always keeping an eye on me, on us. We worked in frantic silence. My arms burned, my chest ached, but fear drove me harder than any whip. Every bucket felt useless against the inferno, but somehow, with enough of them, we kept the sparks from catching. At one point, I dropped to my knees, gasping, certain I couldn't go on. My muscles trembled, my vision blurred. And then Max was there, pressing his body against mine, whining softly, his fur warm under my hand. It was enough. I forced myself back up. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time lost all meaning in the chaos. But slowly, painfully, the fire began to burn itself out. The barn collapsed inward, sending a shower of sparks into the air, but by some miracle, the farmhouse still stood, charred, wet, but standing. When the worst had passed, we gathered in the yard, staring at the blackened skeleton of the barn. My mother wept quietly, my father's face a mask of exhaustion and grief. Everything inside was gone, the tools, the hay, the memories of seasons past. It hurt to look at it, but then I glanced at the animals, huddled in the pasture, every single one alive. I looked at my parents, shaken but safe,
and I looked at Max, sitting proudly at my side, his chest heaving, his fur streaked with soot, but his eyes shining with fierce loyalty. "Good boy," I whispered, my voice breaking. He wagged his tail once, slow and tired, before resting his head against my leg. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Rebuilding would take time, money, and strength I wasn't sure we had. But there was also a strange sense of gratitude that carried me through. We had lost a barn, but not our lives, not our animals, not our home. Word spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors came with tools, with lumber, with food. Everyone wanted to help, and when I told them how Max had woken me, how he had led me to the barn, how he refused to leave until every animal was safe, they looked at him with awe. "He's a hero," one neighbor said, patting his head. Max wagged his tail politely, though I don't think he understood the word. To him, it was just what he was meant to do, to protect, to stay by our side. At night, when the farm was quiet again, I'd sit on the porch with him, staring at the ashes where the barn used to stand. The smell of smoke lingered for weeks, a constant reminder of what we had almost lost. Sometimes the memory of that night would come rushing back, the choking heat, the roar of the flames, the fear clawing at my chest. But then I'd look down at Max, his head resting on my boot, his eyes half closed in peace, and I'd feel something stronger than fear: gratitude. Life on a farm teaches you about loss. Crops fail, animals die, storms take what they will, but it also teaches you about resilience and loyalty. That summer, I learned that a barn can burn, fences can fall, but as long as you have family, both human and the kind with 4 legs, you can keep going. Even now, when I tell this story, people ask me if I'm exaggerating, if I'm making Max out to be more than he was. I always smile and shake my head. No, I tell them. If anything, words can't capture it. You had to be there. You had to see the way he barked, the way he refused to give up. Max didn't just save the farm, he saved us. And in my heart, I know it's the truth.
Thanks for watching. Don't miss the next story.